Good evening. Tonight, we journey together through one of Buddhism's most profound and liberating teachings. The teaching of impermanence. The understanding that all things change, that nothing remains the same, that everything we know, everything we touch, everything we love exists in a constant state of transformation. As you settle into this moment, allow your body to soften. Let the weight of the day begin to fall away. Feel the surface beneath you, supporting you completely. You need do nothing but breathe. Nothing but be here. Before we begin our journey through these ancient stories, take a moment to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Your presence here, wherever you are, is part of this fleeting, precious moment we share together. Take a breath. A long, slow breath. Feel how the air enters your body, fills you, and then leaves. Even your breath teaches impermanence. It arrives. It departs. Just like everything in this world. Just like the stories we'll explore tonight. Stories that have been told for centuries, passed down through generations, each telling slightly different, each moment of listening unique and unrepeatable. The teaching of impermanence is not meant to sadden us. It's meant to wake us up, to help us see clearly, to free us from the suffering that comes from clinging to things that cannot stay. Tonight, these stories will guide us gently toward that freedom, toward rest, toward peace with the way things are. Let yourself relax even more deeply. We have nowhere to go, nothing to accomplish, just these moments together, just these ancient teachings, just the sound of these words carrying you toward sleep. The cherry tree stood at the edge of the monastery courtyard. It had been there for 70 years, planted by a monk who was now long departed from this world. Every spring, without fail, the tree erupted in blossoms. Clouds of pale pink flowers covered every branch, filling the air with their delicate scent. Sogen was a young monk, newly arrived at the monastery. He was 19 years old, filled with questions, uncertain about his path. Each morning during his first spring there, he walked past that cherry tree. Each morning, he stopped. The blossoms seemed so perfect, so beautiful, so eternal in their loveliness. One morning, he found his teacher, Master Hakuin, sitting beneath the tree on a weathered wooden bench. The old master's eyes were closed, his face completely peaceful. The morning light filtered through the blossoms, casting dappled shadows on his simple brown robes. Sogen approached quietly, not wanting to disturb him. But without opening his eyes, Master Hakuin spoke. His voice was soft, like water over smooth stones. "You come here every morning?" "Yes, Master," Sogen replied. "The blossoms are so beautiful. I've never seen anything like them." Hakuin opened his eyes slowly. He looked up at the branches above them, at the thousands of flowers swaying gently in the breeze. A slight smile crossed his weathered face. "They are beautiful," he agreed. "And they are dying." Sogen felt something tighten in his chest. He looked up at the blossoms, so perfect, so alive. "But they're in full bloom. They've just opened." "Look closer," Hakuin said. He pointed to a cluster of flowers directly above them. Sogen looked. At first, he saw only beauty. Then he noticed it. A few petals had already begun to brown at their edges. A few had fallen, dotting the ground beneath the tree like snow in spring. Every blossom opened knowing it would fall. Hakuin said, "The tree doesn't mourn this. The flowers don't resist. They bloom fully, completely, holding nothing back. Because they know their time is brief, they bloom with everything they have." A gust of wind moved through the branches. Dozens of petals came loose, swirling through the air like dancers, settling on the grass, on the bench, on Sogun's shoulders. He watched them fall, and something in him wanted to gather them up, to preserve them, to keep them from disappearing. "That's the second teaching," Hakuin said, watching Sogun's face. "Our instinct is to hold on, to freeze this moment, to make the beautiful things stay. But that's not how life works. That's not how anything works." He stood slowly, his old knees creaking slightly. He bent down and picked up one of the fallen petals. It lay in his palm, still beautiful, but already beginning to curl, to dry, to change. "This petal has not stopped being beautiful," he said. "It has simply changed forms. Tomorrow it will be part of the earth. Next year it will nourish the roots. The year after that, it will become part of new blossoms. Nothing is lost. Everything transforms." Sogun stood there for a long time after his teacher left, watching the petals fall, one by one, constantly, continuously. And in that watching, something shifted in him. The sadness he'd felt began to mix with something else. A sense of the preciousness of each falling petal, each unrepeatable moment, each breath. By the end of the week, the tree was bare. Every blossom had fallen. The branches stood green and simple against the sky. Sogun found that he loved the tree just as much in this form, and he understood that next spring, when the blossoms returned, they would be completely new flowers. The ones he'd loved were gone, and that was all right. That was as it should be. That was the way of all things. This story reminds us of something we often forget in our busy, distracted lives. Everything around us is in a constant state of change. The people we love are changing. Our bodies are changing. Our thoughts and feelings are changing. Even the solid ground beneath our feet is changing. Slowly, imperceptibly, but always changing. When we resist this truth, we create suffering for ourselves. When we resist this truth, we spend our energy trying to freeze moments that cannot be frozen, trying to keep things that cannot be kept. Think about how this shows up in your own life. Perhaps you're scrolling through old photos on your phone at night, feeling sad that those moments are gone. Perhaps you're holding on to a relationship that has already ended in all but name, afraid to acknowledge that things have changed. Perhaps you're mourning the person you used to be, the body you used to have, the life you used to live, not seeing that who you are now is just as worthy, just as real, just as temporary. The cherry blossoms teach us something else, something even more liberating. Because they bloom knowing they will fall, they bloom completely. They hold nothing back. They don't bloom halfway, trying to preserve their energy. They don't ration their beauty. They give everything they have to that brief, shining moment of existence. What if we lived like that? What if we loved like that? What if we showed up to our lives with that kind of wholeness, that kind of presence, knowing that this moment, too, is fleeting? Knowing that this conversation, this meal, This sunset, this embrace, will never come again in exactly this way. The teaching isn't that things don't matter because they change. The teaching is that things matter more because they change. The teaching is that the temporary nature of all things makes each moment infinitely precious, makes each moment worthy of our full attention, our full presence, our full love. This is what the cherry blossoms know. This is what they teach every spring without words. This is the gift they offer to anyone willing to sit beneath them and watch them fall. Rest with this for a moment. Let it settle. Let yourself feel the truth of it. Everything changes. And that's not a tragedy. That's the nature of being alive. Take a breath. A slow, gentle breath. Feel how your body continues to hold you, how the world continues to turn, how you are safe here, right now, in this moment. Let's continue our journey together. A farmer named Kenji lived in a small village at the base of a mountain. He had one son, a boy of 16 named Taro, and one horse, an aging mare who had served the family faithfully for 12 years. The horse was essential to their livelihood. She pulled the plow. She carried their harvest to market. She was, in many ways, the difference between survival and starvation. One morning, Kenji woke to find the gate to the paddock standing open. The horse was gone. He searched everywhere, calling for her, walking the roads, asking neighbors. She had simply vanished. Perhaps spooked by something in the night. Perhaps stolen. Either way, she was gone. The neighbors came by that afternoon, shaking their heads in sympathy. Such terrible luck, they said. Such a disaster for your family. How will you manage? This is truly the worst thing that could have happened. Kenji looked at them calmly. He was a man who had lived long enough to see many things change. Maybe, he said. Maybe this is bad luck. Maybe it's good luck. It's too soon to tell. The neighbors left, confused by his response, certain he was in denial about the severity of his loss. 3 days later, Kenji was working in his field when he heard a sound. Hoofbeats. He looked up to see his mare returning, and with her, 4 wild horses. Somehow, during her time away, she had joined a wild herd and now was leading them back to the familiar paddock. 4 strong, healthy horses. The neighbors rushed over, amazed. What incredible luck, they exclaimed. 4 new horses. You're rich now. Your fortunes have completely changed. This is the best thing that could have happened. Kenji nodded slowly, looking at the horses. Maybe, he said. Maybe this is good luck. Maybe it's bad luck. It's too soon to tell. The next week, Taro was attempting to break one of the wild horses. The animal was spirited, unused to being ridden. It reared up suddenly and Taro fell, landing hard on his left side. His leg broke in 2 places. The village doctor set it, but it would take months to heal. Taro would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Again, the neighbors came, wringing their hands. How tragic, they said. Your only son, crippled. Your only help in the fields, unable to work. This is terrible luck. The worst imaginable. Kenji sat beside his son's bed, placing a cool cloth on the boy's feverish forehead. Maybe, he said quietly, Maybe this is bad luck. Maybe it's good luck. It's too soon to tell. The neighbors thought he had lost his mind. 1 month later, war came to the region. The emperor's soldiers marched through every village, conscripting every able-bodied young man. They went house to house, taking sons from their families, brothers from their sisters. The soldiers came to Kenji's house. They looked at Taro, saw his leg, still in splints, still unable to bear weight. They moved on. Every other young man in the village was taken. Many would never return. But Taro stayed, safe in his father's house, healing slowly, alive. The neighbors said nothing this time. They were beginning to understand something about the way Kenji saw the world. Something about the way he held his judgments lightly. Something about the way he remained present to what was, rather than being swept away by stories about what things meant. Years later, after Kenji had passed away and Taro was an old man himself, people would ask him about his father's wisdom. How did he stay so calm? They would ask, how did he know what was good luck and what was bad? Taro would smile, the same calm smile his father had worn. He didn't know. Taro would say, that's the point. He understood that we can never know. Life keeps unfolding. What seems like disaster opens unexpected doors. What seems like blessing leads to unforeseen challenges. My father didn't try to know the unknowable. He simply stayed present. He simply let things be what they were, understanding that everything changes, and change brings both difficulty and opportunity, often in ways we cannot predict or control. This ancient story offers us something profound. It offers us a way to hold our lives more lightly, a way to stay present even when things seem to be going terribly wrong or wonderfully right. In our modern lives, we're so quick to judge everything that happens. We label every event immediately. Good, bad, fair, unfair, disaster, blessing. And these labels create so much unnecessary suffering. Think about it. Maybe you didn't get the job you wanted, and you spent weeks feeling like a failure, feeling like your life was over. But 6 months later, you found a better job that you never would have applied for if you'd gotten the first one. Or maybe you got the job you wanted, and it turned out to be terrible, and you spent a year miserable before you finally had the courage to leave. Which was good luck? Which was bad? It's impossible to say. Or think about relationships. The person who breaks your heart in your 20s might save you from a lifetime with someone who was wrong for you, leaving you free to meet the person you'll spend your life with. The person you thought was perfect might turn out to have qualities you can't live with. The move that seems like a disaster might introduce you to your best friend. The opportunity that seems so promising might lead you nowhere. The story invites us to hold our judgments lightly, not to pretend we don't have feelings about things, not to become cold or disconnected, but to recognize that our immediate interpretation of events is always limited, always incomplete, always based on too little information. Life is longer than our judgments. Life is more complex than our categories. Life keeps unfolding, keeps revealing new angles, new consequences, new connections. What if, instead of labeling everything so quickly, we simply said, this is what's happening right now? What if we stayed present to our experience without needing to decide immediately whether it's good or bad? What if we trusted that we can't see the whole picture, that we don't know how this chapter fits into the larger story of our lives. There's tremendous freedom in this, tremendous peace. When we're not constantly evaluating everything, we have more energy for simply being present, simply experiencing what is, simply allowing life to unfold. The farmer in the story wasn't wise because he could see the future. He was wise because he knew he couldn't. And in that not knowing, there was peace. In that acceptance of life's constant change and surprise, there was a kind of groundedness that no storm could shake. Breathe. Let yourself feel how your judgments might be lighter than you thought. How the story of your life might be longer and stranger and more surprising than you can imagine from where you sit right now. Rest in that uncertainty. There's more spaciousness there than in any certainty could ever offer. In ancient China, there lived a potter named Wei. He was known throughout the province for his work. His bowls were perfectly symmetrical. His vases held their form without any imperfection. He worked in a small studio behind his house, and every piece he created was exactly as he intended. Exact. Controlled. Perfect. One year, a Zen master named Yunmen came through the region. He was an old man by then, famous for his unconventional teachings, known for saying things that seemed nonsensical but carried profound truth. He stopped at Wei's studio, looking at the pieces displayed on rough wooden shelves. "Beautiful work," Yunmen said, running his weathered fingers along the rim of a bowl. "Flawless." Wei felt pride swell in his chest. Recognition from such a master was rare. "Thank you, master. I've spent my whole life perfecting my craft." Yunmen picked up the bowl, held it to the light, turned it slowly. "Yes," he said. "I can see that. Not a single imperfection. Not a wobble. Not a variation in thickness. Absolutely perfect." He set the bowl down. Then, before Wei could react, Yunmen's hand moved swiftly and deliberately. He struck the bowl with his knuckle. It rang out with a clear, pure note. Then he pushed it, and it rolled off the shelf, fell to the floor, and shattered into a dozen pieces. Wei stood frozen, his mouth open, unable to process what had just happened. His perfect bowl, destroyed by this master. "Why?" Yunmen looked at the broken pieces scattered on the floor. "Now it's complete," he said quietly. Then he bowed and left. Wei was furious. For days, he couldn't work. He couldn't understand. What kind of teaching was this? What kind of master destroys someone's work? He considered going after Yunmen, demanding an explanation. But something held him back. Some intuition that the teaching was already there. In that moment, in those shattered pieces, he began to look at the broken bowl. Really look at it. The shards lay in a pattern on the floor that no design could have created. The break lines were unique, unrepeatable. The way the light hit the edges was strange and beautiful, in a way his perfect bowl had never been. Slowly, an understanding began to dawn. His perfect bowl had been dead. Frozen. Complete only in the sense that nothing more could happen to it. It was finished. But the broken bowl was alive. It was in process. It was teaching impermanence. It was showing the truth of all things, that they arise, they exist, and they pass away. That breaking is not a flaw. Breaking is part of being. Wei left the pieces where they had fallen for many weeks. Each day, he stepped around them, looked at them, let them teach him. Then one day, he gathered them up. He mixed a lacquer with gold dust, an expensive material he'd been saving for something special. He carefully glued the pieces back together, filling each crack with the golden lacquer. The bowl that emerged was unlike anything he'd ever made. The golden veins ran through it like lightning, like the branches of a tree, like rivers on a map. It was no longer symmetrical. It was no longer perfect in the old way, but it was beautiful in a new way. A way that included its breaking, a way that honored its imperfection, a way that told a story. Wei began making his pottery differently after that. He stopped trying to control everything. He allowed accidents to happen. He let pieces crack in the kiln and then repaired them with gold. He let the clay move as it wanted to move. He collaborated with change rather than resisting it. His work became more alive, more real, more true. People said his later work was his finest. But Wei understood something different. His later work wasn't finer. It was simply more honest. It acknowledged what had always been true, that everything breaks, everything changes, everything is marked by time and use and accident. That perfection isn't found in resisting this truth. Perfection is found in embracing it. Years later, when he was an old man, people would come to his studio and ask him about the bowl that Yunmen broke. "Do you still have it?" They would ask. Wei would smile and point to it, sitting on a special shelf, filled with dried flowers. "That bowl taught me everything," he would say. "It taught me that breaking is not the end of beauty. Breaking is how beauty deepens. Breaking is how we become more fully ourselves." This story speaks to something we all experience but rarely acknowledge. We spend so much of our lives trying to appear unbroken, trying to hide our cracks, trying to present ourselves as smooth, perfect, unmarred by life. We're terrified of showing where we've been damaged, where we've failed, where we've been hurt or broken. We think our value lies in our perfection, in our ability to remain intact. But that's not true. That's never been true. Our cracks are not flaws to be hidden. They're part of our story, part of what makes us unique, part of what makes us real. The Japanese have a name for this practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, kintsugi. And the philosophy behind it is that the broken places, the repaired places, the places where something shattered and was put back together, those are the most beautiful parts. Those are what make each piece one of a kind. Think about your own life. Think about the things that broke you, the relationship that ended, the failure that devastated you, the loss that seemed unbearable, the betrayal, the disappointment, the way your body changed, the way your dreams didn't come true. What if those breaks aren't flaws in your story? What if they're where your story becomes most uniquely yours? What if the golden veins running through your life are exactly those places where you broke and healed again? We live in a culture that tells us to hide our struggles, to put on a happy face, to pretend everything is fine, to curate our lives so they look perfect from the outside. But this story invites us to do something radically different. It invites us to honor our breaks, to acknowledge them, to repair ourselves with gold, metaphorically speaking, to let our healing be visible, to let our scars be part of our beauty, This doesn't mean we have to broadcast our pain. It doesn't mean we owe anyone our story. It means we stop seeing ourselves as broken in a bad way and start seeing ourselves as broken in a human way. A way that connects us to every other person who has lived and suffered and continued on. Your cracks are proof that you've lived. Proof that you've loved. Proof that you've taken risks. That you've tried. That you've shown up to your life even when it hurt. The bowl that human broke became more beautiful after it broke. Not despite its breaking, but because of it. You are like that bowl. Your life is like that bowl. And the golden repair work you're doing, the healing you're engaged in, the way you keep getting up and trying again, that's what makes you extraordinary. That's what makes you real. That's what makes you capable of touching other people's hearts, because they can see themselves in your golden-veined, beautifully broken wholeness. Rest now. Let yourself be exactly as broken and exactly as whole as you are. Let it be enough. Let it be beautiful. Let it be true. The river flows gently through the darkness, carrying you deeper into rest, deeper into peace, deeper into these ancient teachings about change. There was a wealthy merchant named Takahashi who lived in Kyoto during the Edo period. He had spent 40 years building his business, importing fine textiles from across Asia. He owned 3 warehouses, employed over 50 people, and lived in a house with gardens that took 2 full-time gardeners to maintain. By any measure, he was successful. By any measure, he had secured his future. One autumn evening, as Takahashi was reviewing his accounts, his steward burst into the room. "Fire," the man said, breathless from running. "The warehouses, all 3. They're burning." Takahashi ran to the waterfront. From 2 blocks away, he could see the flames reaching into the night sky, could smell the smoke, could hear the roar and crack of burning timber. By the time he arrived, there was nothing to be done. The warehouses were fully engulfed. The textiles inside, silk from China, cotton from India, wool from Europe, all of it was burning. His entire inventory, his entire fortune, going up in smoke. He stood watching for hours. His employees gathered around him, many of them weeping, knowing their livelihoods had just vanished with those flames. As dawn broke, the fire finally died down. All that remained were 3 piles of smoking ash and twisted metal. 40 years of work, gone in one night. Someone standing near Takahashi muttered, "Everything is lost. Everything is destroyed." Takahashi turned to look at the man. His face was covered in soot, his eyes red from smoke, but his expression was strangely peaceful. "Nothing is destroyed," he said quietly. "Things have simply changed form. The silk is now ash. The wood is now smoke. The building is now empty space. Nothing has been destroyed. Everything has only transformed." The employees looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. But Takahashi walked home slowly, and as he walked, he felt something shifting inside him. A kind of lightness, a kind of freedom he hadn't felt in years. The weight of all that wealth, all that responsibility, all that constant worry about maintaining what he'd built, it had lifted. He was starting over. He was 62 years old, and he was starting over. And somehow, impossibly, this felt like an opportunity rather than a catastrophe. Over the following weeks, as he sat in his garden and contemplated his next steps, something became clear to him. He had been holding on so tightly to what he'd built that he'd stopped being alive in any real sense. Every day had been about protecting what he had, expanding what he owned, securing his position. He'd stopped noticing the changing seasons, stopped enjoying conversations with his wife, stopped feeling anything except a constant, low-level anxiety about maintaining his success. He did not rebuild the warehouses. Instead, with the small amount of savings he had kept at home, he opened a tiny tea shop near a temple. Just one room. Just simple tea and simple sweets. He worked there himself, greeting customers, preparing tea, listening to their stories. He discovered that he loved this work in a way he'd never loved his merchant business. There was something about the simplicity of it, the directness of it, the human connection in it. His former employees thought he had lost his mind. His wife worried about their future. But Takahashi was more at peace than he'd been in decades. The fire didn't take anything from me, he would tell people who asked. The fire gave me something. It showed me that everything I thought I couldn't live without, I could actually live without quite easily. It showed me that what I thought was permanent was actually the most temporary thing in the world. It showed me that when we lose what we're clinging to, we don't fall. We fly. The tea shop became known throughout the district. Not because the tea was extraordinary, but because of the presence Takahashi brought to each serving. The way he moved with deliberateness and grace. The way he seemed to see each customer as if they were the only person in the world. The way he embodied a kind of contentment that was rare and precious. 20 years later, when Takahashi was an old man, someone asked him if he'd ever regretted losing his merchant business. He smiled, his hands cradling a tea bowl, still warm from the kettle. "You can't lose what was never yours to keep," he said. "Everything flows. Everything changes. Everything moves on. The only question is whether we flow with it or exhaust ourselves trying to make the river stand still." This story illuminates something essential about how we relate to loss. We think loss diminishes us. We think when we lose something, we have less. But sometimes loss reveals something. Sometimes loss clears space. Sometimes loss shows us what actually matters versus what we only thought mattered because we'd grown accustomed to having it. In your own life, think about what you're clinging to. Not just physical possessions, though those count too. But think about the identities you're holding on to. The self-image, the reputation, the role you've been playing so long you've forgotten it's a role. The relationship that ended years ago but you're still carrying. The youth you no longer have. The career that's over. The version of yourself that no longer fits who you've become. What would happen if you let go? What would happen if you accepted that things have changed and you don't need to hold on to what was? We're so afraid of loss. So afraid of empty hands. So afraid of not being who we were. But the merchant in the story discovered something profound. He discovered that emptiness is not the same as nothingness. He discovered that empty space is where new things can grow. He discovered that you can build your whole life around maintaining something and then lose it all and still be fine. Still be yourself. Still be whole. This is one of the great liberating truths of impermanence. Nothing you lose could ever diminish your fundamental nature. Your possessions come and go. Your roles come and go. Your relationships come and go. Your health comes and go. But you, the awareness that experiences all of this, The presence that remains through every change, that doesn't come and go. That doesn't get lost in the fire. That can't be destroyed by any catastrophe. The merchant found peace, not by rebuilding what he lost, but by accepting what is. By flowing with change rather than against it. By discovering that the life on the other side of loss can be just as meaningful, just as full, just as rich as the life before it. Sometimes more so, because it's freed from the burden of constant protection, freed from the illusion of permanence, freed into the truth of this moment, exactly as it is, which is always enough. Let yourself imagine releasing what you've been holding so tightly. Just imagine it. Notice what arises. Fear. Maybe, but maybe also relief. Maybe also a sense of possibility. Maybe also a recognition that you're still here, still breathing, still capable of beginning again, no matter what you've lost or what has changed. Breathe deeply. Feel the steady rhythm of your heart. Notice how you continue, moment by moment, through all changes, through all losses, through all transformations. You are more resilient than you know, more capable than you believe, more free than you realize. In a Tibetan monastery high in the mountains, a young monk named Dorje was preparing for his first meditation retreat. This was a traditional practice in his lineage, 49 days of solitary meditation in a small stone hut, contemplating the nature of death and impermanence. He was 24 years old, strong and healthy, and he couldn't really imagine his own death. It seemed impossibly distant, like something that happened to other people, to older people, but not to him. Not yet. His teacher, Lama Tenzin, came to see him the evening before the retreat began. The old Lama's face was deeply lined, weathered by decades of mountain wind and sun. His eyes were clear and kind. "Tomorrow you begin your death meditation," Lama Tenzin said. "Do you understand what you'll be contemplating?" "Yes, Lama. The impermanence of life, the certainty of death, the uncertainty of when death will come." "Those are the words," Lama Tenzin agreed. "But do you understand them?" Dorje hesitated. "I think so." The Lama smiled. "Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to do something. Hold your breath. Hold it as long as you can. Then notice what happens." That night, lying on his narrow bed, Dorje did as his teacher instructed. He took a deep breath and held it. Seconds passed. His chest began to ache. The urge to breathe grew stronger and stronger. After perhaps 45 seconds, he couldn't hold it any longer. He gasped, air rushing into his lungs, sweet and necessary and automatic. He tried again. Same result. His body simply wouldn't let him hold his breath indefinitely. Something stronger than his conscious will took over and forced him to breathe. And in that moment, lying in the darkness, he understood something visceral. His life was happening breath by breath. Each breath came and went. Each breath was a small death and rebirth. He was alive right now, but only because his body was continuously performing an action that it would, someday, stop performing. His life was being sustained by a process that would inevitably cease. The next morning, he entered the meditation hut. It was a small space, barely larger than a closet. Stone walls, a small window, a meditation cushion. Nothing else. He sat down and began the traditional contemplation. Death is certain. The time of death is uncertain. When death comes, nothing will help except spiritual practice. At first, these were just words. But as days passed, something deeper began to happen. He started to feel, not just think about, his own mortality. He became aware of his heartbeat in a new way. Each beat was one beat closer to the last beat. Each breath was one breath closer to the last breath. Each moment was one moment closer to the moment when he would cease to exist in this form. This awareness didn't make him anxious. That was the surprising thing. It made him present. Extraordinarily present. Because if this moment might be his last, then this moment deserved his full attention. If this breath might be his last, then this breath deserved his complete appreciation. If today might be the day he died, then today needed to be lived fully, lived well, lived without the postponement and procrastination that had characterized so much of his life before. One afternoon, sunlight came through the small window and fell across his hands folded in his lap. He looked at his hands, really looked at them. These hands that had never existed before the day he was born. These hands that would someday no longer exist. These hands that were, right now, in their brief moment of existence, warm and alive and capable of touch, capable of holding, capable of helping. His eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, from gratitude, from the overwhelming preciousness of having hands at all, of being alive at all, of having this brief moment of consciousness in the vast eternity of time. By the time the 49 days ended and he emerged from the meditation hut, he was changed. Not in ways others could necessarily see, but in the way he met each moment, the way he spoke to his fellow monks, the way he ate his meals, the way he walked through the monastery. Everything had become precious because everything was temporary. Everything had become vivid because everything was passing. Years later, when Dorje had become a teacher himself, students would ask him how to practice meditation on death. "It's simple," he would say. "Hold your breath. Not as long as you can. Just hold it for a moment. Then notice what it feels like when you let it go and breath comes back in. Notice the relief, the sweetness, the way your body knows exactly what to do. Notice that this is happening continuously. You are being kept alive by a process you don't control. And someday, that process will stop. Not as punishment, not as tragedy, just as the natural completion of a cycle. And when you really understand this, not just intellectually, but in your bones, in your breath, in your blood, then you stop wasting your life. You stop postponing love. You stop saving your energy for some imaginary future. You give everything you have to this moment, right now, because this might be all you get. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. This practice of contemplating death might seem morbid to modern Western minds. We're taught to avoid thinking about death, to push it away, to focus on youth and health and living forever. But the Buddhist tradition understands something profound. Understanding death doesn't diminish life. Understanding death enhances life. Understanding death makes every moment more precious, more real, more worthy of our full presence and attention. Think about how you live. Do you live as if you have unlimited time? Do you postpone conversations you need to have? assuming there will always be another chance? Do you save your good dishes for special occasions that never quite arrive? Do you delay doing the things you really care about, thinking you'll get to them later, when things settle down, when you're more ready, when you have more time? What if you don't have more time? What if this is it? What if today is the day? This isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Because the truth is, none of us knows how many days we have. We act as if we do. We make plans years into the future. We assume we'll be here next year, next decade. And maybe we will be. But maybe we won't. The nature of life is that it ends. For everyone. No exceptions. No escape. And this ending can come at any moment. A car accident. A stroke. A sudden illness. Death is not far away. Death is always right here, right now, waiting patiently for the moment when this particular expression of consciousness completes its cycle. But here's what the young monk discovered. Here's what the Buddhist tradition has known for 25 centuries. When you really accept this truth, when you stop pretending you have forever, everything changes. You stop sweating the small stuff. You stop wasting time on things that don't actually matter. You stop holding grudges. You stop postponing love. You tell people you love them. You do the work that calls to your heart. You show up fully to each moment because you understand it might be your last. This isn't living in fear. This is living in truth. This is living in freedom. The meditation on death is actually a meditation on life. It's a meditation on the preciousness of existence, on the miracle of consciousness, on the extraordinary gift of having this brief time to be aware, to experience, to love, to connect, to contribute something to the great river of life that flows through all beings. You don't have forever, but you have now. And now is enough. Now is everything. Now is where all life happens. Now is where love lives. Now is where you can make a difference. Now is where you can be fully present. Now is all you ever really have. And when you understand that, really understand it, you stop wasting now. You start living. Release the tension in your shoulders. Feel your breath moving in and out without any effort from you. Notice how your body knows what to do. How life is happening through you, not by you. How you are being breathed. How you are being lived. How precious this is. How temporary. How perfect, exactly as it is. A grandmother named Mieko lived in a small coastal village in Japan. She was 87 years old, a widow for 12 years, and she had a daily practice that the other villagers thought was quite strange. Every morning, just after dawn, she would walk to the cemetery at the edge of the village. She would visit the grave of her husband, Hiroshi, and she would talk to him. Not pray, not mourn, talk. She would tell him about her day, about what the grandchildren were doing, about the weather, about the garden, about her aching knees and how the neighbor's cat had started coming by every afternoon expecting fish. She would speak to him as if he were sitting right there, as if death were just a thin veil rather than an absolute ending. One morning, her granddaughter Aiko, who was visiting from Tokyo, decided to follow her grandmother. She wanted to understand this strange ritual. She stood at a distance, watching Mieko kneel by the grave, watching her speak to the stone marker, watching her laugh at something, as if Hiroshi had said something funny. When Mieko stood to leave, Eiko approached. "Grandmother," she said gently, "why do you do this? Grandfather has been gone for so long. Do you really think he can hear you?" Mieko looked at her granddaughter with eyes that were clear and bright despite their age. "Come, sit with me," she said. They sat on a bench nearby, looking out at the ocean visible between the pine trees. "When your grandfather died," Mieko began, "I thought my world was ending. We had been married for 62 years. 6 decades. He was the only man I ever loved. The only man I ever kissed. We had raised 4 children together, survived a war together, built our life together stone by stone, day by day. When he died, I didn't know how to be myself without him." She paused, watching a bird hop along the ground, searching for something. "The first year was very hard. I would wake up and reach for him, and he wouldn't be there. I would think of something to tell him, and then remember I couldn't. I would cook his favorite meal out of habit, and then realize I was the only one to eat it. Everything reminded me that he was gone. Everything reminded me that things had changed, and I could never change them back. But slowly, something shifted," she continued. "I began to realize that Hiroshi wasn't really gone. Not completely. He was in everything. In the house we built together. In the children who carried his gestures, his way of laughing, his love of the sea. In my memories. In the way I saw the world, which had been shaped by 62 years of seeing it alongside him. He had changed form, yes, but he hadn't disappeared." Eiko listened, not sure she understood. "You see," Mieko said, "everything that lives leaves an imprint. Everything that happens creates ripples that go on and on. When Hiroshi's body died, his form ended, but his influence continued, is continuing, will continue long after I die too. The trees we planted still grow. The house we built still stands. The children we raised are raising their children. The kindness he showed to neighbors is remembered and passed on. Nothing really ends. Everything just transforms. So when you talk to him," Eiko said slowly, "when I talk to him, I'm not talking to a ghost. I'm not pretending he's still alive in the way he was. I'm acknowledging his continued presence in a different form. I'm honoring the way he shaped me, the way our life together continues to influence how I live now. And I'm practicing acceptance of change. Every morning I acknowledge that he's not here in body, but I also acknowledge that what we shared can never be destroyed. Love doesn't die. Love changes form. Love becomes memory, becomes influence, becomes the shape of your own heart." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the ocean, feeling the cool morning air. Finally, Eiko said, "Do you still miss him?" "Every day," Mieko said simply. "But missing is just love that has nowhere to go except into your own heart. Missing is how we honor what was precious. Missing is proof that something mattered so much that its absence is felt. I don't try to stop missing him. I just don't let the missing stop me from living." She stood, her old knees protesting slightly. "Everything changes, Eiko. Everything ends. Everyone we love will die, or we will die and leave them. This is not tragedy. This is the nature of existence. The only question is whether we let this truth make us small and afraid, or whether we let it make us present and grateful. Whether we let it teach us to love more fully while we can. Whether we let it show us that nothing is wasted, nothing is truly lost. Everything transforms into something else. They walked back to the village together, grandmother and granddaughter, through the morning light, through the temporary and precious world, through the constantly changing landscape of loss and love and life. This story touches something tender in all of us. The reality that everyone we love will either leave us or we will leave them. This is the difficult truth at the heart of impermanence. We cannot keep our loved ones forever. We cannot freeze our relationships in some perfect moment. Everything we cherish will someday be gone, or we will be gone, and those who love us will be the ones left missing. This is perhaps the hardest teaching of impermanence to accept. It's one thing to accept that material things pass away. It's quite another to accept that the people we love will pass away, that our parents will die, that our friends will die, that we ourselves will die and leave behind everyone and everything we care about. The mind wants to rebel against this truth, wants to find a way around it, wants to make an exception just this once. But there is no exception. There is no way around it. Everyone born will die. Every relationship will end, either through death or through the countless small changes that transform people until they're no longer who they were when you first loved them. This is not a pessimistic teaching. This is not meant to make you sad or fearful. This is meant to wake you up to the preciousness of now. When you truly understand that your time with the people you love is limited, you stop taking them for granted. You stop postponing the conversation. Stop assuming there will always be another chance to say I love you, to say I'm sorry, to say thank you, to say all the things that matter. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and recognize that this moment, imperfect as it is the only moment you're guaranteed to have. Think about the people in your life. Your parents, your children, your partner, your friends. Each of these relationships is temporary. This time you have together is limited, unknown in its duration, but definitely limited. What would you do differently if you really understood this? Would you hold grudges? Would you stay angry over small things? Would you postpone telling people what they mean to you? Or would you love more openly, forgive more easily, show up more fully to the time you have together? The grandmother in the story found a way to hold both truths at once. The truth that her husband was gone, and the truth that what they shared continues. She didn't pretend he was still alive. She didn't deny the reality of death. But she also didn't act as if his death erased everything that came before. She understood that people live on in what they've created, in who they've touched, in how they've shaped the hearts of those who loved them. This is a more mature understanding of death than either pretending it doesn't happen or being destroyed by it when it does. When someone dies, what ends? Their body ends. Their particular form ends. But their influence continues. Their love continues. The lessons they taught continue. The memories continue. They live on in different form, transformed from physical presence into something more subtle but no less real. And when we die, we too will live on in this way, in the hearts of those who loved us, in what we created, in how we touched the world during our brief time here. Rest in this knowledge. Rest in the understanding that nothing is truly lost in this universe. everything transforms. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only changed from one form to another. The same is true of love. The same is true of the impression we make on each other's hearts. The same is true of every meaningful connection, every moment of genuine presence, every act of kindness or courage or compassion. Nothing is wasted. Everything matters. Everything continues in new forms. Breathe slowly. Feel the air moving through you. Know that you are part of this great transformation, that you are both permanent and impermanent. Your form will pass, but your influence will ripple forward. Love fully while you can. That's all any of us can do. That's everything. The temple had stood for 300 years. Its massive wooden pillars had been cut from old-growth forest, each one the trunk of a tree that had lived 400 years before being harvested. The roof tiles were original, hand-formed by craftsmen whose techniques had been passed down through generations. The temple was a masterpiece, recognized throughout Japan as a cultural treasure. Master Kosen had been the head priest for 42 years. He was 78 years old now, his back bent from decades of bowing, his hands gnarled from decades of sweeping, raking, tending. He loved this temple the way a parent loves a child. He had given his life to its care and maintenance. He had guided thousands of visitors through its gates, performed countless ceremonies within its halls, meditated under its roof through every season for 4 decades. One August evening, lightning struck. The sky had been building all day, thick clouds rolling in from the ocean, the air heavy and electric. When the bolt came, it split the darkness with such brilliance that for a moment everything was daylight. It hit the temple's main hall directly. Within minutes, the ancient wood was burning. Kosen ran from his quarters, but there was nothing to be done. The fire spread too quickly. The old wood, dried by centuries, burned like paper. The villagers came running with buckets, but it was useless. By dawn, the temple was gone. Only the stone foundation remained. Everything else was ash. 300 years of history, 300 years of prayer, 300 years of careful preservation, gone in a single night. The villagers stood in stunned silence, looking at the devastation. Many were weeping. This temple had been the heart of their village, the place where their grandparents and great-grandparents had been married, where babies had been blessed, where funerals had been held. The loss felt unbearable. Someone turned to Master Kosen, expecting to see him destroyed by grief. But the old priest was standing quietly, his hands folded, looking at the smoking ruins with an expression that wasn't quite peace, but wasn't despair either. It was acceptance. It was understanding. It was something deeper than emotion. "Master," a young woman said, her voice breaking. "The temple, everything, it's all destroyed." Kosen nodded slowly. "Yes, the building has burned. The building is gone. How can you be so calm?" she asked. "You've devoted your whole life to this place." Kosen turned to look at her. His eyes were clear. "I devoted my life to what the temple represented, not to the wood and tiles. The temple was never just a building. The temple was where we gathered, where we practiced, where we remembered the teachings. The building is gone, yes. But what made it a temple? That hasn't burned. That can't burn. He gestured to the people gathered around. Look at all of you. You came running to help. You're standing here together, feeling this loss together. This is temple. This connection, this caring, this being together in the face of impermanence. The building just held space for this. But the space is still here. We're still here. In the weeks that followed, Kosen continued to hold services on the stone foundation. People sat on the ground where the hall had been. They meditated under the open sky. They chanted sutras with the sounds of birds and wind instead of echoes against wood. And something interesting happened. The practice deepened. Without the ornate building, without the distraction of the temple's beauty and history, people found themselves more present, more focused on the actual practice rather than the setting. One day, a wealthy donor from Tokyo came to see Kosen. He had heard about the fire. He wanted to fund the rebuilding of the temple. We can make it exactly as it was, the donor said. Every detail. We have old photographs. We can find craftsmen who know the traditional techniques. We can restore it perfectly. Kosen thanked him for his generosity. But I don't think we'll rebuild it the same way, he said. The old temple served its time. It was beautiful. It was meaningful. And now it's gone. If we try to recreate exactly what was, we're fighting against impermanence. We're trying to bring back what has ended. Instead, let's build something appropriate for this moment. Something that acknowledges what happened. Something that incorporates the fire into its design, rather than trying to erase it. So they built a new temple. Simpler. More open. With large windows that let in the sky. And in the main hall, they incorporated charred beams from the original temple into the design. The blackened wood stood out against the new clean lumber. It told the story. It honored what was lost while embracing what was new. It was a temple that knew it was temporary. A temple that knew it would someday burn or decay or be destroyed by earthquake or time. And this knowing made it more honest, more real, more in alignment with the very teachings it existed to share. Years later, people would come specifically to see this temple, not because it was a perfect recreation of the past, but because it embodied impermanence in its very design. It told the truth. It said, everything passes, everything changes, everything ends. And this is not tragedy, this is how things are. Learn to love what is temporary. Learn to honor what has ended. Learn to build what is needed now, not what was needed then. Learn to flow with change rather than being destroyed by it. This story speaks to our relationship with loss on a larger scale. Not just the loss of individuals, but the loss of institutions, traditions, ways of life. We live in a time of tremendous change. Things that seemed permanent are vanishing. The world our parents knew is gone. The world we knew as children is gone. And this can feel terrifying. This can feel like everything meaningful is disappearing. But what if the form is not the essence? What if the building is not the temple? What if the institution is not the value it represented? What if we can preserve what actually matters while releasing what was only ever a container for it? This is one of the great challenges of our time. Learning to let go of the forms while preserving the essence. Learning to adapt while staying true to what's most important. Learning to flow with change without losing our center. Think about your own life. What forms are you clinging to that no longer serve? What ways of doing things are you trying to preserve simply because they're familiar, even though they're not working anymore? What institutions or structures or routines or identities are you defending because you're afraid that without them, you'll lose everything? What if you could release the form while keeping the essence? What if you could let things change while staying anchored in your deepest values? The temple burned, but the practice continued. The building was destroyed, but the Sangha remained. The form ended, but the essence persisted. This is the pattern of all meaningful things. They're not actually about the external structure. They're about something more essential, something that can survive and adapt and take new forms as circumstances change. In your work, in your relationships, in your spiritual practice, in your creative life, what is the essence? What is the thing that actually matters underneath all the forms you've created to express it? And can you hold that essence while allowing the forms to change? Can you let your life evolve while staying true to who you are at the deepest level? Can you flow with impermanence while remaining anchored in what doesn't change? The teachings don't change. Compassion doesn't change. Love doesn't change. Awareness doesn't change. But everything else, all the forms, all the structures, all the ways we organize our lives and express these essences, those are meant to change. Those are supposed to change. And when we fight that change, we exhaust ourselves in a battle we cannot win. But when we flow with it, when we adapt while staying true to our core values, we find a kind of strength and flexibility that nothing can break. Let yourself soften even more. Let go of what no longer serves. Hold fast to what actually matters. Know the difference. Trust the difference. Live the difference. There was a master calligrapher named Seiko who lived in a monastery in the mountains. She had studied the art of brush and ink for 53 years. Her strokes were legendary, each one perfect in its weight and movement, each character balanced and alive. Students came from across the country to watch her work, to learn from her technique. But Seiko had a practice that confused her students. Every evening, before she put away her brushes, she would create one final piece. She would work on it with complete concentration, with all her skill, with total presence. And then, once the ink dried, she would tear it up. Every single night. A perfect piece of calligraphy, created and destroyed within an hour. One of her students, a young woman named Yuki, finally asked her about this. "Master Seiko, why do you destroy your evening practice? Those pieces are as beautiful as anything you create. Why not keep them?" Seiko continued cleaning her brush, moving the bristles gently against the grinding stone. "What is beauty?" she asked. "The pieces you create are beautiful. The balance, the energy, the perfection of each stroke. And when I tear them up, does that beauty cease to exist?" Yuki thought about this. "Well, yes. The beautiful thing is destroyed." Seiko smiled. "Come sit with me." They sat by the window, looking out at the garden where evening was falling, shadows lengthening between the stones. "Tell me, is the sunset beautiful?" "Of course. And yet it ends. Every evening, it ends. The sun drops below the mountains. The colors fade. Darkness comes. Is the sunset destroyed?" "No," Yuki said slowly. "It's just finished. It's just what sunsets do. Exactly. The sunset is beautiful precisely because it's temporary. If it lasted forever, if the sky stayed orange and pink and gold indefinitely, it wouldn't be beautiful anymore. It would be static, dead. The beauty is in the transition. The beauty is in the brief moment of perfection that arises and passes away. That's what makes us stop and look. That's what takes our breath away. The knowing that this exact light, this exact color, will never happen again in quite this way. She gestured toward the torn pieces of calligraphy in the wastebasket. When I create those evening pieces, I create them with complete commitment. I give them everything I have, and then I release them. I don't cling to them. I don't need them to last forever. They served their purpose in the moment of creation. In that hour, when my brush moved across the paper, I was fully present. I was fully alive. I was fully giving myself to the work. That's what matters, not the object that remains. Yuki sat with this for a while. Then she said, "But isn't there value in keeping beautiful things? In preserving them? In allowing others to see them?" "Of course," Seiko said. "And I do keep many pieces. I sell them. I give them away. I hang them in temples and galleries. But if I kept everything, if I couldn't bear to release anything I'd created, I would be imprisoned by my past work. My studio would fill with old pieces. My mind would fill with attachment to what I've done. I would stop being present to what I'm creating now and start being concerned with protecting what I created then." She stood and walked to her work table, picking up one of the torn pieces. This piece was perfect for what it was. I created it with care. I appreciated it while I made it. And then I released it. By doing this every evening, I practice non-attachment. I practice being present to the process rather than the product. I practice understanding that the value of art isn't only in the object that remains, but in the consciousness that creates it. Every evening I create and destroy. I strengthen my understanding that everything arises and passes away, that nothing lasts. That beauty is not diminished by impermanence, it's intensified by it. Years later, after Seiko had passed away, people spoke of her not only as a master calligrapher, but as a master of presence. They said that being in the room while she worked was like being present to something sacred. Not because her work was perfect, though it was, but because she was completely there, completely in each stroke, completely released from the last one, completely unburdened by concern for what would happen to the piece once it was finished. Some of her students continued her practice. Every evening, they would create a piece and then destroy it. And they found that it changed everything. It freed them from the anxiety about whether their work was good enough, freed them from attachment to results, freed them to be fully present to the act of creation itself. They discovered what Seiko had known, that the work you do when you're not attached to keeping it is different from the work you do when you're concerned about its permanence. It's freer, more alive, more honest, more real. This story invites us to examine our relationship with creation and preservation. We live in a culture obsessed with permanence. We take photos of everything, trying to preserve every moment. We save every draft, every version, every attempt. We hold on to things long after they've served their purpose. We build monuments and archives and collections. We try to make the temporary permanent. But what if this attempt to preserve everything is actually preventing us from being fully present to anything? What if our constant documentation is pulling us out of direct experience? What if our attachment to keeping things is keeping us from fully releasing into the moment of creating or experiencing them? The calligrapher understood something profound. That presence matters more than preservation. That the experience of creating matters more than the object created. That being fully alive in this moment matters more than having proof that the moment existed. Think about your own life. How much of your energy goes into documenting and preserving? How many photos do you take that you never look at again? How many objects do you keep that you never use? How many memories are you trying to freeze instead of simply honoring and releasing? What if you trusted that the meaningful moments live on in how they've shaped you, not in the physical evidence that they happened? This doesn't mean you shouldn't take photos or save meaningful objects. It means you might check your relationship with these things. Are you present while taking the photo? Or are you so concerned with capturing it that you miss experiencing it? Are you keeping this object because you genuinely use and appreciate it? Or are you keeping it out of guilt or obligation, or some vague sense that you should preserve everything? What if you practiced what the calligrapher practiced? What if you regularly created something beautiful and then released it? It doesn't have to be art. It could be a meal that's photographed and admired and then eaten and digested and gone. It could be a conversation that goes deep and meaningful and then ends without being recorded. It could be a moment of joy that you experience fully without trying to capture it. The practice is the same. Presence, appreciation, release. Presence, appreciation, release. Over and over. This is how we practice impermanence on a daily level. We show up fully. We give ourselves completely. We appreciate what is, and then we let it go. We let it change. We let it become something else. We don't cling. We don't try to make the temporary permanent. We flow with life instead of fighting against its fundamental nature. And in this flowing, there's tremendous freedom, tremendous lightness, tremendous presence. Because you're not burdened by having to maintain and protect and preserve everything you've ever created or experienced. You're free to be here now. Free to create now. Free to experience now. Free to love now. And now is where all life happens. Now is where all beauty lives. Now is where you are most alive. Now. Now. Always now. Let yourself release. Let yourself trust that everything meaningful will somehow continue in new forms. Let yourself be present to this moment without needing to preserve it. This moment is enough. This breath is enough. This now is everything. In a village at the edge of a great forest, there lived a woodcarver named Takumi. He had learned his craft from his father, who had learned from his father, going back 6 generations. The family workshop contained tools that were 200 years old, passed down through the years, each craftsman caring for them, sharpening them, using them to create beautiful objects from wood. Takumi was known for his patience. He would sometimes spend weeks selecting the right piece of wood for a project, walking through the forest, examining trees, waiting for something to speak to him. And once he chose a piece of wood, he would spend months working it, following the grain, revealing the form that was hidden inside. But as Takumi grew older, something began to change in him. He was 68 now, and he had been carving for 60 years. He had created thousands of pieces. Some were in museums. Some were in temples. Some sat in homes across the country. He had been successful by any measure, and yet he felt something was missing. Some essential understanding, some final piece of wisdom that his craft was trying to teach him. One autumn, a massive oak tree near his workshop fell during a storm. It was ancient, probably 300 years old, thick as a house. Takumi looked at the fallen giant and felt drawn to work with it. He chose a large section of the trunk and had it delivered to his workshop. The wood was dense, heavy, complex in its grain. He began to work. For weeks, he carved. The piece that was emerging was of an old monk in meditation. The proportions were perfect. The face was serene. Every fold of the robe was exactly as Takumi intended. It was, perhaps, the finest piece he had ever created. People who saw it in progress would shake their heads in wonder. "A masterpiece," they said. "Your greatest work." Takumi agreed. It was exactly what he had envisioned. Exactly what he had worked for decades to be able to create. And yet, as he put the finishing touches on it, as he smoothed and refined every last detail, he felt something strange. Dissatisfaction. A sense that despite its perfection, something was wrong. Something was dead about it. It was too controlled. Too much a product of his will and skill. Too little a collaboration with the wood itself. He sat in his workshop for 3 days, just looking at the carving, trying to understand what he was feeling. And slowly, a realization came. This piece was perfect. And that was the problem. There was no room in it for change. No room for weathering or aging or being marked by time. It was complete, which meant it was finished, which meant it was, in some sense, already dead. On the 4th day, Takumi made a decision. He took his sharpest chisel, and he deliberately, carefully, carved a crack into the monk's face. Not a random crack, a considered one, running from the corner of the eye down to the jaw. A crack that looked like it might have naturally occurred as the wood aged, as the tree continued to dry and shift even after being carved. His apprentice, watching, was horrified. "Master, what are you doing? You're ruining it." But Takumi felt something release in his chest. The piece was no longer perfect. The piece was no longer finished. The piece had room now to continue changing, to continue aging, to continue its transformation from living tree to carved object to whatever it would become over centuries. The crack gave it life. He stepped back and looked at the monk with its cracked face. And now he saw something different in its expression. Not just serenity, but serenity that had been earned, that had come through difficulty, through damage, through imperfection. The crack made the monk real in a way the perfect version had not been. He began to carve differently after that. He would work with wood, yes, but he would leave space for the wood to continue being itself. He would leave edges rougher. He would follow knots and irregularities rather than working around them. He would allow checks and cracks to remain, incorporating them into the design. His later work was less technically perfect but more alive, more honest, more real. One day, a collector came to his workshop. He saw an old piece, one of the perfect early works, sitting on a shelf, and he saw a newer piece, rough-edged and weathered-looking, displayed in a place of honor. "Which piece do you value more?" the collector asked. Takumi thought for a long moment. The old piece shows what I could do. The new piece shows what the wood and I did together. The old piece will look the same in 100 years. The new piece will continue to change, to age, to become more itself over time. The old piece is a monument to my skill. The new piece is a celebration of impermanence. He picked up the newer carving, running his fingers along its rough edge. This piece knows it's temporary. This piece knows it's in process. This piece knows that perfection is not in permanence but in honesty. And that's a different kind of beauty, a truer kind. This story offers a profound teaching about perfection and control. We spend so much of our lives trying to get things exactly right, trying to create something perfect, trying to present ourselves as flawless, trying to craft a life that looks good from every angle. And in this striving for perfection, we often create something that's dead, something that has no room for growth or change or the beautiful imperfection of real life. Think about the areas of your life where you're striving for perfection. Your appearance, your work, your home, your relationships, your self-presentation on social media, your spiritual practice. What would happen if you deliberately introduced some imperfection? What would happen if you allowed things to be rough around the edges? What would happen if you stopped trying to control everything and instead collaborated with the way things naturally want to unfold? The Japanese have a concept called wabi-sabi, which celebrates the beauty of imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. It finds beauty in the weathered, the worn, the asymmetrical, the humble, the modest. It sees that a tea bowl with an irregular glaze is more interesting than a perfect one, that a garden path made of mismatched stones has more character than a perfectly uniform one, that a face marked by years of living is more beautiful than a smooth, unlined face that shows no experience. This is not about being sloppy or careless. This is about being real, about acknowledging that you're not in complete control, about allowing life to mark you, to shape you, to crack you open in ways that make you more interesting, more authentic, more alive. Your imperfections are not flaws to be hidden. They're proof that you've lived, proof that you've tried things, proof that you've been shaped by experience. They're what makes you you instead of some generic, perfect, but ultimately lifeless version of what a person should be. The woodcarver learned to work with the wood instead of trying to impose his will on it completely. What would it mean for you to work with your life instead of trying to force it into some predetermined shape? What would it mean to collaborate with what is instead of always trying to make things be what they're not? What would it mean to accept that your life will never be perfect, but it can be real? And real is better than perfect. Always. Because real is alive and perfect is static and done. Let yourself be imperfect. Let yourself be in process. Let yourself be marked by time and experience. Let yourself be cracked open by life. These cracks are not flaws. These cracks are where the light gets in. These cracks are what make you beautiful in a real way instead of perfect in a dead way. These cracks are proof that you're still changing, still growing, still becoming. And that's what being alive is. Not arriving at perfection, but continuing to change, continuing to learn, continuing to be transformed by everything you experience. Rest in your beautiful imperfection. Rest in your work in progress self. Rest in the truth that you will never be finished. And that's exactly as it should be. You are alive. You are changing. You are becoming. and that's perfect enough. The night deepens around you. Your body grows heavier, more relaxed. These stories are carrying you gently toward sleep, toward rest, toward peace with the way all things change. In a monastery in the mountains of Vietnam, there lived a master named Thầy Minh Duc. He had been a monk for 63 years. He had weathered wars, had seen his country torn apart and slowly heal, had witnessed tremendous suffering and tremendous resilience. He was 91 years old, and he knew his death was approaching. He could feel it in his body, in the way his energy was slowly withdrawing, in the way each day required more rest and less activity. His students asked him if he was afraid. He smiled and shook his head. How can I be afraid of something I've been doing my whole life? They didn't understand. Master, you haven't died before. Haven't I? He said. I die every night when I fall asleep. I die every moment as one breath ends and another begins. I die every time I let go of a thought. The body's final death is just one more letting go. One more breath that doesn't return. It's what I've been practicing all along. In his final weeks, Thầy Minh Duc asked to be moved to a small hut at the edge of the monastery grounds. He wanted to watch the rice fields, to see the mountains, to be present to the world in these last days. His students came to sit with him, and he would talk with them about what he was experiencing. Dying is like the rice harvest, he said one afternoon. They were watching farmers work in the fields below, cutting the ripe golden stalks, gathering them, taking them to be threshed. The rice grows, the rice ripens, the rice is harvested. This is not tragedy. This is the purpose of rice. If the rice refused to be harvested, it would simply rot in the field. Its potential would be wasted. But because it accepts the harvest, it becomes food. It nourishes. It serves its purpose. In the same way, I have grown. I have ripened. Now it's time for the harvest. My body has served me well for 91 years. It has carried me through this life, allowed me to practice, allowed me to serve, allowed me to love, and now it's wearing out. This is not failure. This is completion. This is the natural end of the cycle. Another day, he said, watch the fire. They had built a small fire to keep him warm as evening came. The wood burns. The fire rises. Light and heat come forth. Then the fire dies. The wood becomes ash. Where did the fire go? It didn't go anywhere. It transformed. It became heat that warmed us. Light that let us see. Ash that will nourish the soil. The fire didn't end. It changed form. When this body stops working, when the last breath leaves, where will I go? Nowhere. I will transform. This body will return to elements. But the love I have given will continue in your hearts. The teachings I have shared will continue in your practice. The kindness will ripple forward. The peace I have cultivated will radiate outward. Nothing is lost. Everything continues, just in different form. On his final day, he was very weak. His breathing was shallow and irregular, but his mind was clear. He looked at his students gathered around him and smiled. "Don't be sad," he whispered. "This is beautiful. This is exactly as it should be. I am going home. Home where, Master? One student asked through tears. "Home to everything," he said. "I came from the earth, and I return to the earth. I came from the elements, and I return to the elements. I came from the great source of being, and I return to the great source of being. I was never separate. I was always part of everything. I'm just becoming more aware of that now." He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, became quieter, and then, between one breath and the next, it stopped. His face remained peaceful. His body remained still, and his students sat with him in silence, feeling not just loss but something else too. Presence. Continuation. The sense that Thamin Duk had not disappeared, but had simply stepped through a doorway they couldn't yet see. After the traditional ceremonies, his students scattered his ashes in the rice fields he had loved to watch. The next spring, the rice grew especially well in that field, thick and green and golden when it ripened. And the students understood. Thamin Duk had told them the truth. He had not ended. He had transformed. From teacher to teaching, from body to nourishment, from form to essence, from one kind of presence to another. This story brings us to the ultimate expression of impermanence, the reality of our own death. And what the old master understood is what all the Buddhist teachings point toward. Death is not an aberration. Death is not a mistake or a punishment. Death is simply the completion of a cycle. Birth and death are not opposites. They're partners, two sides of the same process, the ending that makes space for new beginning. We are terrified of death in our culture. We hide it. We medicalize it. We pretend it's not going to happen. We push it away. But the Buddhist tradition invites us to do something different, to look directly at death, to understand it, to make peace with it. Not because death is pleasant, but because accepting death is how we fully embrace life. When you know you're going to die, when you really accept this truth, you stop wasting time. You stop postponing what matters. You stop living as if you have forever. Think about your own death. Not morbidly, not anxiously, just realistically. You will die. Your body will stop functioning. This particular expression of consciousness that you call I will end. This is certain. The only uncertainty is when. It could be decades from now. It could be tomorrow. It could be tonight, while you sleep. None of us knows. And this not knowing is actually a gift, because it means that every moment could be your last. Every conversation could be your final one. Every sunset could be the last sunset you see. If you knew you were dying tomorrow, what would you do today? Who would you call? What would you say? What regrets would you release? What would suddenly seem unimportant? What would suddenly seem essential? The practice is to live as if this were true, because it is true. You are dying tomorrow, or next week, or next year. The timing doesn't matter. The certainty does. This life will end. This body will stop. This identity will dissolve. And in the face of that truth, what actually matters? The old master taught that death is like the rice harvest. Your life has grown. You've experienced things, learned things, loved things, created things. And now, when death comes, it's simply the gathering of what you've grown. the transformation of your form into something else. Your body returns to earth. Your energy returns to the universe. Your influence continues in those you've touched. Nothing is lost. Everything transforms. This is not a religious belief. This is observable truth. Energy cannot be destroyed. It only changes form. You are energy. When your body dies, that energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes heat and breakdown and eventually nutrients that feed other life. Your consciousness, your love, your essence, whatever you want to call what's most essentially you, that also doesn't disappear. That also transforms into memory in others' minds, into influence on others' lives, into the ripples that continue forward through time from every action you've taken, every word you've spoken, every moment you've been truly present. So death is not the end. Death is transformation. Death is the completion of one cycle and the beginning of others. And when you understand this, not just intellectually, but deeply, in your bones, you become free. Free from the desperate clinging to this body, this identity, this particular form. Free to be fully present to life exactly as it is, moment by moment, without the constant anxiety about keeping things from changing. Free to love completely, knowing that what you love will die or you will die, but that love itself doesn't die. Love transforms. Love continues. Love radiates forward forever. Rest in this truth. Rest in the understanding that you are temporary and eternal at the same time. Your form is temporary. Your essence is eternal. You will die, and that's all right. That's as it should be. That's the pattern of all life. And in accepting this, you become free to fully live, fully love, fully be here now. Because now is all you ever have. Now is where all life happens. Now is precious beyond measure because it's fleeting, because it's unrepeatable, because it will never come again. And that's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it worthy of your full attention. That's what makes each breath, each heartbeat, each moment of consciousness infinitely valuable. Breathe. Feel your breath moving through you. Know that each breath is a gift. Know that you won't breathe forever. Know that someday the breathing will stop. And let this knowing make this breath more precious. Let it make this moment more vivid. Let it wake you up to the extraordinary gift of being alive right now. In this body, in this world, in this fleeting, precious, unrepeatable moment. You are safe. You are held. You are part of the great cycle of existence that includes birth and death and everything between. Rest in that. Trust that. Let yourself be carried by the great river of life that flows through all things, that arises in new forms and dissolves in ending forms, continuously, eternally, perfectly. You are that river. You are that flow. You are that eternal dance of form and emptiness, of arising and passing, of being and becoming. Sleep now. Let go. Rest deeply. You are held by something larger than your small self. You are part of something that never ends. You are loved by the universe that created you and will receive you back when your time comes. Rest. Rest. All is well. All is changing. All is exactly as it should be. Good night. Sweet dreams. May you wake tomorrow with fresh eyes, ready to meet each moment as if it were new. Because it is. Because everything is new, always, if we have eyes to see it. Sleep peacefully. You are loved. You are temporary. You are eternal. You are exactly what you need to be, right now, in this moment. Rest. A young woman named Hana worked in Tokyo as a corporate lawyer. She was 34 years old, ambitious, driven, and exhausted. She worked 14-hour days, slept 5 hours a night, and measured her worth by her productivity. Her apartment was in one of the newest buildings in Shibuya, all glass and steel and modern efficiency. Everything in her life was designed for maximum performance. One day, her firm sent her to Kyoto to handle negotiations with a traditional company. The meetings were held in an old building near a temple. During lunch break, Hana walked through the temple gardens, needing to clear her head from the tense morning session. The garden was ancient, designed 400 years ago. Moss-covered stones, trees arched over carefully raked gravel. A small stream wound through the space, its water crystal clear. Hana found herself stopping, just standing still, listening to the water, watching how the light filtered through the maple leaves. An old monk was working in the garden, pulling weeds from between stones with slow, deliberate movements. He worked as if he had all the time in the world, as if each weed was worthy of his full attention, as if there was nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. Hana watched him for several minutes. Finally, she approached. "Excuse me, how long does it take to maintain this garden?" The monk looked up, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Every day, some hours. For 400 years. 400 years. Hana was stunned. The same garden for 400 years. The same garden, the monk agreed. But not the same garden. The moss grows and recedes. The trees change with seasons. The stones settle. The stream shifts its course slightly. Every day it is the same garden. Every day it is completely different. He stood slowly, his old knees taking time to straighten. "You see this maple tree?" He pointed to a magnificent tree, its leaves just beginning to turn red with autumn. This tree was planted 83 years ago. Before that, there was a different tree in this spot. Before that, another. The garden remains. The elements within it change. Hana felt something shift in her chest. But doesn't it bother you that nothing lasts? That everything you care for will eventually die or change? The monk tilted his head, considering. Does it bother the garden? Does the maple tree mourn when its leaves fall? Does the stream worry about where it will flow tomorrow? They simply do what they do. They change as they change. They are fully present to what they are, right now, without regret for what they were or anxiety about what they will become. He knelt again, returning to his weeding. You are like the garden. You know, every cell in your body is constantly being replaced. The person you were as a child is completely gone. Physically, the person you are now is not the person you will be in 10 years. You change continuously. The question is not whether you will change. The question is whether you will resist the change or flow with it. Hana stood there for a long time after the monk returned to his work. She thought about her life. How she was always pushing, always striving, always trying to reach some future state where she would finally be successful enough, accomplished enough, secure enough. How she was never present to what was happening right now because she was always focused on what needed to happen next. That evening, instead of working in her hotel room, she returned to the temple garden. She sat on a bench as twilight fell, watching how the light changed, how shadows lengthened, how the garden transformed from moment to moment. She began to notice things she'd never noticed in her entire adult life. The exact quality of silence, the way her breath sounded, the feeling of air on her skin, the aliveness of simply being present without any agenda. She didn't immediately quit her job or change her whole life, but something had shifted. She began taking small moments throughout her day to simply stop, to notice, to be present. She would pause during her commute and really look at the sky. She would take 5 minutes to drink her tea without checking her phone. She would notice when the seasons changed, when the trees along her street blossomed or lost their leaves. Her colleagues thought she was becoming less ambitious, but Hannah understood something different. She was becoming more alive. She was learning to be present to the life she had, instead of constantly striving for the life she thought she should have. She was learning that everything changes, and fighting that change was exhausting her, while accepting it was freeing her. Years later, Hannah would tell people that the garden saved her life. Not dramatically, but truly. It showed her that there was another way to be, a way that accepted change instead of fighting it, a way that found peace in impermanence instead of anxiety, a way that was fully present to this moment instead of always reaching for the next one. This story speaks to those of us caught in the trap of modern life. The constant striving, the endless productivity, the feeling that we're always running but never arriving. We live as if the present moment is just something to get through on the way to some future moment when things will finally be right. When we'll finally be successful enough, thin enough, rich enough, accomplished enough, together enough. But that moment never comes. Because as soon as we reach one goal, we set another. The finish line keeps moving. What if there is no finish line? What if life is not a race to some destination but a garden to be tended moment by moment? What if the point is not to arrive somewhere but to be fully present where you are? The garden doesn't try to become something other than what it is. The garden simply is, moment by moment, season by season, year by year, constantly changing but always itself. Always complete exactly as it is, even as it continues to transform. Think about your own life. How much of your mental energy goes into planning the future or worrying about it? How much goes into regretting the past or trying to fix it? How much actual presence do you bring to this moment, right now, exactly as it is? Not as preparation for the next moment, not as a stepping stone to some future state. Just this moment, for its own sake, as an end in itself. This is the practice. To stop, to notice, to be here, to let this moment be enough. Not to pretend you don't have plans or goals or things you need to do, but to recognize that all of those exist in some imaginary future, while your actual life is happening right now, right here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this exact experience of being alive. The garden changes every day. You change every day. Nothing stays the same. And this is not a problem to be solved. This is the nature of reality. This is how things are. And when you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to make things permanent that cannot be permanent, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that impermanence itself is where beauty lives. That change itself is what makes life alive. That the temporary nature of all things is what makes each thing precious. The maple leaves turn red. Then they fall. Then they decay. Then they nourish the soil. Then new leaves grow. This is not tragedy. This is beauty. This is the dance of existence. And you are part of this dance. You are one of the leaves. You grow green. You turn color. You fall. You return to the earth. And this is perfect. This is as it should be. This is the pattern of all life. Rest in this understanding. Rest in the flow of change. Rest in the truth that this moment is enough. You don't need to be anywhere else. You don't need to be anyone else. You don't need to have accomplished more or become more. You are exactly what you need to be, right now, in this moment. And this moment is exactly what it needs to be. Perfect in its imperfection. Complete in its incompleteness. Whole in its constant transformation. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink deeper into rest. Let yourself be held by this moment, by this truth, by this ancient understanding that has sustained seekers for thousands of years. Everything changes, and in that change is where life happens, where beauty happens, where love happens, where you happen, right now, right here, always and only now. There was a master potter named Sachiko who lived in a small town famous for its ceramics. She had studied her craft for 40 years, learning from her grandmother, who had learned from her grandmother, an unbroken line of women creating vessels from earth and fire. Sachiko's tea bowls were prized for their simplicity and their subtle irregularity. Each one was unique, shaped by her hands, marked by the flame. One spring, a wealthy collector from Osaka came to her studio. He wanted to commission a tea bowl for his collection. He was willing to pay an extraordinary amount, but he had specific requirements. The bowl must be perfectly symmetrical. The glaze must be completely uniform. It must be flawless in every way. Sachiko listened to his requirements and then shook her head. "I cannot make what you're describing." The collector was confused. "But you're a master potter. Surely you have the skill to create a perfect bowl." "I have the skill," Sachiko agreed, "but I don't have the desire. A perfect bowl is a dead bowl. It has no life in it. The beauty of a tea bowl comes from its irregularities, from the way the glaze pools unevenly, from the slight wobble in its shape, from the marks left by the flame and the process. These imperfections are what make it alive." The collector frowned. "But imperfections are flaws. They diminish value." Sachiko picked up one of her bowls from a nearby shelf. It was beautiful in a way that was hard to define. The shape was almost round, but not quite. The glaze was a deep blue that was lighter in some places, darker in others. There was a small divot on one side where her thumb had pressed too hard while shaping it. "This bowl is worth more because of this mark," she said, running her finger over the divot. "Not despite it. This mark proves it was made by human hands. This mark tells the story of its creation. This mark makes it unrepeatable. If I tried to make this exact bowl again, I couldn't. This bowl exists only once. That's what makes it precious. She filled the bowl with water from a pitcher and held it up to the light. Watch how the light moves through the glaze. See how it's brighter here, darker there. See how the color shifts as you turn it. A perfectly uniform glaze would be static, dead. But this glaze is alive. It has depth. It has movement. It has the story of the fire written into it. The collector looked at the bowl for a long time. Slowly, his expression changed. He began to see what Sachiko was showing him. The bowl was not perfect, but it was beautiful in a way that perfection never could be. It had character. It had personality. It had life. I understand, he said finally. I've been collecting the wrong things. I've been seeking perfection when I should have been seeking authenticity. Sachiko smiled. Perfection is an idea. It exists only in the mind. In the real world, everything is imperfect. Everything is marked by the process of its creation and the process of its existence. A bowl that's been used for tea for 20 years will have stains, tiny chips, wear marks, and these don't make it less beautiful. They make it more beautiful. They prove it has lived. It has served. It has been part of the human experience of drinking tea and being present and sharing moments with others. She poured the water out and dried the bowl carefully. I will make you a bowl, but not a perfect one. I will make you a bowl that is alive, a bowl that shows the marks of my hands, a bowl that tells the story of earth becoming vessel through fire, a bowl that will change as you use it, that will gather its own story through the years, a bowl that accepts its impermanence and therefore fully embodies beauty. The collector agreed. 6 weeks later, he returned to pick up the bowl Sachiko had made. It was extraordinary. Not perfect, but alive. He took it home and began to use it for his daily tea ceremony. And as the months passed, the bowl changed. The glaze darkened slightly where his fingers habitually held it. A small stain appeared where tea had seeped into a nearly invisible crack in the glaze. These changes didn't diminish the bowl's beauty. They deepened it. They made it his. They made it part of his story. Years later, that collector became known for his collection of living ceramics. Not perfect pieces kept behind glass, but used pieces, handled pieces, pieces that bore the marks of their use. And people would come to see his collection and understand something they hadn't understood before. That beauty is not found in perfection. Beauty is found in authenticity, in the honest marks of making and using and living, in the acceptance that nothing lasts forever, but everything can be beautiful in its temporary existence. This story returns us to a theme that runs through all of these teachings. The idea that imperfection is not flaw but feature. That the marks of time and use and wear are not things to be hidden but things to be honored. We live in a world obsessed with newness, with pristine condition, with removing all evidence of age and wear. We want our things to look brand new forever. We want our faces to look young forever. We want everything to be perfect and unchanging. But this desire is fundamentally at odds with reality. Nothing stays new. Nothing stays pristine. Nothing remains unmarked by time. Your body ages. Your possessions wear. Your relationships change. Your home settles and weathers. And you can fight this truth your entire life, constantly trying to maintain and restore and keep things exactly as they were. Or you can accept it, flow with it, find the beauty in the wear patterns and the age marks and the signs of living. Think about your favorite coffee mug, the one that's slightly chipped, the one that's stained from years of use, the one that fits your hand perfectly because you've held it thousands of times. That mug is not perfect, but it's more valuable to you than a pristine new mug would be. Because it's yours. Because it's been part of your life. Because its imperfections tell a story. The same is true of your home if you've lived there a while. The scuff marks on the floor from moving furniture, the small dent in the wall from that one time, the stain on the counter that won't quite come out. These aren't flaws. These are the story of your life written into the physical space. These are proof that you've lived here, that this space has held you, that your life has happened within these walls. And the same is true of your body. The lines on your face, the grey in your hair, the scars from surgeries or accidents, the way your body has changed shape over the years. These are not flaws. These are not signs of failure. These are the marks of a life lived. These are proof that you've been here, that you've experienced things, that you've survived and continued. Your body tells the story of your life. And that story is beautiful, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. The potter understood something profound. That objects gain beauty through use. That wear patterns and age marks and the story of a thing's existence make it more valuable, not less. That perfection is static and dead, while imperfection is alive and real. This is true of objects, and it's true of us. We gain beauty through living, through being marked by our experiences, through carrying the evidence of our years. So stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to erase the marks of your life. Stop trying to make things stay exactly as they were. Instead, honor the changes. Honor the wear patterns. Honor the story written into your body and your possessions and your space. This is your life. This is the evidence of your existence. This is beautiful, exactly as it is, in all its imperfect, changing, temporary glory. Let yourself age. Let your things age. Let everything show the marks of use and time. This is not loss. This is accumulation. Accumulation of story. Accumulation of experience. Accumulation of life itself. You are more beautiful now than you were 20 years ago. Not despite the changes, but because of them. Because you've lived. Because you've experienced. Because you carry the wisdom of your years. Because you're real in a way you weren't when you were younger and more pristine and less marked by life. Rest in this. Rest in your beautiful, imperfect, changing, temporary existence. Rest in the knowledge that you don't need to be perfect. You need to be real. And real is always more beautiful than perfect. Always. Without exception. In the mountains of northern Japan, there was a small temple known for its bell. The bell was not large or ornate. It was made of simple bronze, cast 300 years earlier by a craftsman whose name had been forgotten. But the bell's sound was extraordinary. When struck, it would ring with a note so pure, so clear, so sustaining, that people would travel for days just to hear it. The temple's abbot was a monk named Enju. He was responsible for ringing the bell each dawn and each dusk, marking the transitions of the day. He had been doing this for 32 years. Twice a day, every day, for 32 years. He had walked to the bell tower, pulled the rope, and sent that perfect note out across the valley. One morning, Enju arrived at the bell tower to find a crack. It was small, barely visible, running about 3 inches down from the bell's rim. He touched it gently, his heart sinking. A crack meant the bell's sound would change. A crack meant the perfect note would be lost. He rang the bell anyway. It had to be rung. This was his responsibility. He pulled the rope and the striker hit the bronze. The sound that came forth was different. Not drastically different, but different. There was a slight warble now, a minor dissonance. The note no longer sustained quite as long. The perfection was gone. Enju felt grief wash over him. This bell had been his companion for 3 decades. Its sound had marked his days, structured his practice, called the faithful to prayer. And now it was damaged, changed, no longer what it had been. He sat in the bell tower for a long time, just looking at the bell, running his fingers along the crack. He felt anger at whatever had caused this. A shift in temperature, perhaps. Metal fatigue, the inevitable wear of 300 years of use. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. The bell was cracked. The sound was changed. Nothing could undo it. That evening, when it was time for the sunset bell, a thought came to him. The bell was still here. The bell still rang. The sound was different, yes, but it was still beautiful. Just beautiful in a new way. Beautiful in a way that acknowledged its damage, its age, its history. Beautiful in a way that was perhaps more honest than the perfect note had been. He rang the bell. The sound went out across the valley, carrying that slight warble, that minor imperfection, and he listened to it differently. He listened for what was there rather than mourning what was gone. And what he heard was beautiful, not perfect, but real, authentic, marked by time and use. A sound that told the truth about existence, that everything ages, everything changes, everything carries the marks of its history. Over the following weeks, something interesting happened. People began to comment on the bell. They said its sound had deepened, had become more interesting, had gained a quality it hadn't had before. Some said it sounded more human now, more like a voice than just a note. The perfect sound had been impressive, but this new sound was moving. It touched something in the heart. Enju realized that the bell had always been moving toward this moment. From the day it was cast, it had been aging, weathering, moving toward the inevitable crack. The 300 years of perfect sound had been beautiful, and this new era of imperfect sound was equally beautiful. Just different. Just the next chapter in the bell's long story. One day, a visitor asked him about the crack. "Will you repair it? Replace the bell?" Enju shook his head. "This crack is part of the bell's story now. This crack is honest. It tells the truth that nothing lasts forever unchanged. It reminds us every time we hear it that everything is impermanent. That even bronze cracks. That even the most perfect things eventually show wear. And that this wearing doesn't mean the end of beauty. It means the transformation of beauty. the deepening of it. He looked up at the bell, hanging in its wooden frame. The crack now familiar, now just part of what the bell was. This bell teaches me every day now. It teaches me not to cling to how things were. It teaches me to appreciate what is. It teaches me that damage doesn't mean the end. Damage means change. And change is the nature of all things. Fighting it is suffering. Accepting it is peace. The bell continued to ring for many more years. The crack slowly grew longer, spreading down the bell's side. The sound continued to change, the warble becoming more pronounced, the sustain getting shorter, and Enju continued to ring it, twice daily, witnessing its transformation, learning from its impermanence, finding beauty in its honest acknowledgement that nothing stays the same. When Enju was an old man, nearing death himself, someone asked him what the bell had taught him over all those years. He smiled, his face deeply lined, his eyes bright. It taught me that there's no such thing as ruined. There's only changed. The bell isn't ruined by its crack. It's just different now. And I'm not ruined by my age. I'm just different now. We're both still here. Both still serving. Both still beautiful. Just in new ways. Ways that acknowledge our time, our where, our honest reality. This story offers a teaching about how we respond to damage. When something we love changes or breaks or is diminished in some way, our first response is often grief and anger. We want it back the way it was. We want to undo the damage. We want to restore the original state. This is natural. This is human. But this is also where suffering lies. Because the original state cannot be restored. What's done is done. What's changed is changed. The only question is how we respond to the change. We can rage against it. We can mourn endlessly. We can see only loss. Or we can do what the monk did. We can look for what's still here. We can listen for what beauty remains. We can find value in the changed state rather than only missing the original state. This doesn't mean we don't feel grief. It means we don't stop at grief. We move through it to acceptance, to appreciation of what is rather than only mourning what was. Think about something in your life that's changed or been damaged. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your confidence or your sense of self. Something that was one way and is now another way. And the change feels like loss. You can spend your life mourning that loss. Or you can ask, what's still here? What beauty remains? What new possibilities has this change opened? What can I appreciate about how things are now instead of only missing how things were? This is not toxic positivity. This is not pretending damage doesn't hurt. This is honest acceptance of reality. Things change. Sometimes the change is unwelcome. Sometimes it feels like loss. But the change has happened, and you're still here. And life continues. And beauty is still possible. Just different beauty. Just the next chapter of your story, instead of trying to stay frozen in an earlier chapter that's already ended. The bell kept ringing. With its crack, with its changed sound, and it was still a bell. It still served its purpose. It still called people to practice. It still marked the transitions of the day. It just did so with a more honest sound. A sound that said, I've been here a long time. I bear the marks of my existence. I'm not perfect anymore. I'm real. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Let yourself be like that bell. Changed but still here. Damaged but still beautiful. Not what you were but still yourself. Still serving. Still showing up. Still ringing out your note across the valley of your life. Imperfect and honest and real. This is enough. You are enough. Exactly as you are. In this exact moment. With all your cracks and changes and imperfections. You are still you. Still valuable. Still beautiful. Still here. Rest deeply now. Let these stories settle into your heart. Let them work on you the way water works on stone. Slowly, gently, persistently. Let yourself be shaped by the truth of impermanence. Let yourself find freedom in accepting change. Let yourself rest in the knowledge that you are part of the great flow of existence, temporary and eternal, changing and unchanging, imperfect and perfect exactly as you are. Sleep now. Let go completely. Trust the darkness. Trust the rest. Trust that you will wake and the sun will rise and life will continue its constant transformation. Moment by moment, breath by breath, always now, always new, always perfect in its imperfection. Good night. Sleep deeply. Rest well. You are loved. You are held. You are part of everything, now and always. Rest.